Howdy, happy Tuesday. AP Psych, welcome to my toddler's playroom. Let's do some more review slides. Here we go. What a great image to start with. Let's do some stats stuff. So as of the announcement and AP information that we've received today, you'll have two writing sections, and one of them will be about research and data. So here we go. This is a wonderful one to start with if we're looking at some data stuff. Go ahead and pause. Talk about it, jot some stuff down, review as best you can, see what you can come off of the top of your head, and then we'll augment and add to it. So for the first thing here, we have a bell-shaped curve, or you could call it a normal distribution. Generally, if we've got any population, you're going to end up with something that looks like this if we try and measure or quantify something about it. In this case, it's going to be for intelligence scores. That would be your best example of something you would likely pick up on or look at and see as something that's going to show this sort of information. I'm going to make it just a little bit larger for us if possible. Okay, so in the case of this one, we're going to have as the mean, median, and mode, they're all going to be right down the center there as opposed to a skewed distribution like we ended up with yesterday. You end up with, in this case, that number is going to be 100. That's the number right down the middle. And then each step up and down would be a standard deviation or a normal difference. Standard deviation is definitely something to associate with this from that norm. So in this case, it's going to be 15 points as our standard deviation. So if we go up from 100, we add 15 points, we get up to 115. And opposite, if we go down from 100 and take 15 points down, we end up at 85. And in a normal distribution, you would anticipate or expect to see, you've got 68% of the population that should fall right in there in that one standard deviation above or below, perfectly normal, or generally what we'd anticipate to see. That'll be 34% of your population above, 34% below then if you cut that in half. If we're talking about two standard deviations below or two standard deviations up, now we're looking at 95% of the population. I mean, that's damn near everybody. It falls right inside that. So we're looking at an extra 13.5% of the population down as well as up, for a total, again, of 95% of the population. Now you're talking about, you're definitely pushing and getting towards outliers here. If you've got something like, in this case, the number is going to be 130, so two steps up, 15 points and 15 points from that 100, so 130 plus, and only 2.5% of the population is going to fall within that. And you do another step up, you're at 145 standard deviation, and now you're at just 0.1% of the population. It would be extremely unlikely you come across that many people then that have an intelligence score on the Wechsler for anything above that amount. Or even if you're talking about any standard deviation, 1, 2, you're talking about 3 plus, that's a huge jump up, or the opposite would be a jump down, you know, away from the norm, away from that 100. All right, let's do a new slide. Excellent one. This should be quick and easy for you. I would hope you can get an easy, at least 10 different things that you could draw and label regarding the neuron. Go ahead and hit pause and give yourself, I would assume it's going to take maybe a couple of minutes to do it if you got scratch paper there. Okay, if you're good, let's talk about stuff here. And in the interest of some of your time and mine, I'm going to go ahead and refrain from writing it all out because it ends up being kind of a pain. I will start with the whole thing. Clearly, it's a neuron. I believe I just said that. We've got here, if we're starting at the beginning, each little end there is going to be a dendrite that will receive what we don't have on here, little dot, dot, dots. Hopefully you got a whole bunch of them if you were going to be drawing and labeling it, because you're not just going to be sending one. They send out huge volumes of neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters cross the gap at either end of the neuron. So the presynaptic or the postsynaptic, whether it's the receiving or the sending neuron. Presynaptic is the one we're looking at and sending for the whole deal. Postsynaptic would be the next one on the next end there. And the dendrites are going to be crossing, traversing that synapse is the space between, because dendrites don't touch. Right in the center here, we will have a nucleus, as this is a cell. And if we recall, neurons are big babies. They need something to hold them. They need something to nourish them so they can get that this stuff here, the myelin, that'll speed up the actual sending of the neurotransmitter or the action potential. MYELIN is going to be the little fatty deposits on there to speed up the signal. The whole body of the neuron there, you can call a cell body or a soma. I'll just put an S for soma. If you took anatomy, you may have done in between here, we've got little nodes of Ranvier. I don't care that you know that. Or the axon. Hillock's going to be this thing right here. But the big, long branching extension, that whole space, but not just the fatty deposits on there, is the axon. And as we continue down the axon, if it's going to be one that sends a signal from either one side of the brain to the other, or from like your fingertips onto your spinal cord and your brain and whatnot, you're going to probably have a big long extension here. Hopefully it will be myelinated so it sends the signal fast. And as you get along the axon, and then we get these little branches here and they start to separate, we've got an axon terminal. We'll do an A and a T, axon and terminal. And in this case, you're going to have a bunch of different ones at the end of it. And then at the very end there, storing all the different types of neurotransmitters, be it acetylcholine, or you can have dopamine, you can have whatever in the world it's trying to send. You've got an axon, terminal, and then button or bouton, holding all the different types in there. Types of neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are going to be the dots. And synapse is what we're going to cross onto the next one. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of those. The signal itself is an action potential. Once it fires, we're going to go from the action potential to, it's got to recharge again. It's got to take just a brief moment before it can send that signal once again. And that recharge period is going to be called a refractory period. Absolutely. And then it's hanging out and it's waiting and it's good to go. It will be in resting potential. Before it fires all over again. There's some neuron stuff. All right, let's do another thing. Brain parts. So if we're talking about the bottommost, the base part of your brain, just this section here, and as far as most of our textbooks were concerned, it's only going to be 3 parts. I'll give you another one just in case it were to appear on the AP exam. This is the brainstem. And we're doing some of the lower level functioning stuff to make sure everything's going to the most base activity you need central nervous tissue to do. So if you're going to be sending signals from one place in the other to other brain parts that will evolve later, and on top of the brainstem, we're looking at the thalamus, sensory switchboard. So all of your senses with the exception of just one, which is smell, goes to and then through your thalamus before it gets routed to wherever it's going to go. So all the rest of your senses, if it's a sense of touch, it's got to come up and then go to, and then it's going to go on to the section of your brain that will do the feeling stuff, the somatosensory cortex or the sensory cortex. In this case, each of those spots along right here in this section in the very front of the parietal lobe will get that information. Or if it's a vision thing, it goes in, it goes to the thalamus, through, and then it goes back to the occipital lobe. Another brain part, we're talking about the fibrous cords that are going to run up and down inside of, in this case, the brainstem. We're now looking at the reticular formation, which will be level of arousal, awaken asleep and awaken asleep, like an alertness, but not just making you go to sleep. If we're talking about making or initiating that sleep actually starts, that's this round portion here, and that's called the pons. The pons' job, if we're talking about a low level of arousal, you start actually nodding off, but to actually make you truly conk out and then be unaware and go to stage 2, 3, and then 4 for sleep. Now we're looking at the pons is what initiates that reticular formation level of arousal. We've got one more part on the bottom. And that will be the medulla, heartbeat, breathing, some of the autonomic nervous functioning stuff that you have to have in order to keep alive, make stuff happen. And again, you can override some of that, even though it's autonomic or automatic, but essentially you're looking at that stuff being what you don't have to control. Hey, brain part in bottom and back. And this will be the cerebellum for balance, coordination, fine motor movement stuff. So they actually be able to do things with great accuracy. As I'm having breakfast cereal this morning with a toddler, I'm usually able to hold the spoon, get my cereal, put it in my mouth without spilling all over, as opposed to my toddler that's going to hold the thing and go and then get food on himself and spill milk all over the place. Doesn't even care. No big deal. He's got a cerebellum and it's functioning relatively well. Definitely not perfect though. He can't hardly eat yogurt without getting it all over both his shirt and his face. Let's keep going with some more brain parts here. If we're looking at now, we're on top of the brain stem. You've got the little system that's going to sit and do some of the motivation stuff. What are we looking at here? I'm going to pause, or you pause. What are they? What do they do? In no particular order. Around and over the top for your limbic system is what this whole thing is going to be, your limbic system. LS to keep it quick and clean. Your limbic system, your hippocampus is going to be everything except for fingernails. So if it's going to be your hand that goes around on one side and then around on the other, but not fingernails on either side, nor over the top there. Your hippocampus is going to do the explicit memory stuff. So unlike your cerebellum that will help do some of the procedural memory stuff, the things that you do, that fine motor movement, balance, coordination stuff, now we're looking at a hippocampus here, whose job it is going to be to convert those explicit memories. What's your birthday? What's your name? What's your address? Stuff like that. Things that you would explain or you'd be able to say. Amygdala, and so it would be thumbnail on one side, fingernails on the other, is going to be primarily associated, I want you to think, with memory. And then the hypothalamus, motivation of the 4 or 5 F's, depending on your sex. Fight, flight, food, fornicate. I'd say we got time for one more at least. Hey, now we're looking at some awesome brain parts here. Specifically, notice these are going to be on the left side, and the left side of almost everybody's brain is going to be the one that has communication skills or the ability to talk. So there's an up front, and there's going to be one and slightly in back. And if you're good, these are going to be the we're looking at auditory for hearing, and we're looking at visual for seeing stuff. I completely started with the wrong thing that I had in mind. Auditory stuff, or on your temporal lobe, will be by your ears. Occipital visual stuff is going to be in back. All right, my ticker's telling me we're at about 13 minutes, and apparently that's about what we're supposed to be looking at for lessons. So what I'm going to do is stop here, and I will plan on doing a few more of these probably for the remainder of the week. I hope it's helpful. Let me know if you got any feedback. Let me know if you have questions. I'm also going to post some stuff along with this video on what exactly is going to be on your exam and when it's exactly supposed to be. So I will post that for you. Do make sure you check it out and let me know if you have questions. All right, have a good one, guys. Talk to you later.